Good. All right. Welcome back to a new episode of Transformed and Renewed. I am your coach, Jerry Thomas Jr., and we are continuing our second part of our series on sugars. And so we're going to be talking about various subtopics as it relates to sugar. But before we really get into it, if this is your first time or you are returning, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on your screen. That way you stay up to date with all content related to Robody that we're doing. And you are the first to know of any changes, anything that we start to work on. So, in order for you to do that, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. And it is pretty much easy from then on. So, like I said last week, we talked briefly about sugars. We talked about the different classes of sugars. Say you have monosaccharides and you have disaccharides. And then you also have polysaccharides. And the difference between each of those is that monosaccharides are going to be simple sugars or single units. With disaccharides, they tend to contain two types or two units of monosaccharides. Okay. With polysaccharides, they can contain more than two units of monosaccharides. And so when it comes to monosaccharides, you have glucose, fructose, and galactose. And then with disaccharides, you have sucrose, lactose, and maltose. Okay. When we think about that, because you may be wondering, okay, I hear monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. What does that mean? Well, when we get into the different classes of sugars, so that is more of the scientific terminology or the technical terminology. But to break it down, in case you may not be familiar, you have simple sugars. So these are going to be in their simplest form, also known as simple carbs or simple carbohydrates. This tend to be granulated sugar. Sometimes you can have white sugar, cane sugar, brown sugar, the different variations of that inert sugar or invert sugar. You have turbinado. You have, again, I want to say maple syrup, anything that is simple, as well as if it is mostly sugar on the label, you will see added sugar. So it is likely going to be listed as a form of added sugar. Okay. When we talk about complex carbohydrates or complex sugars, these are going to take a little bit more time to break up. So the simple sugars, their chemical structure is broken down into the simplest forms, whereas your complex carbohydrates, they have a more complex chain in terms of the chemical structure. So it takes the body more time in order to break down this structure, which is good. Okay. So when we think about complex carbohydrates, what are some examples? Well, you have different types of fruit. Think apple, banana, strawberries, blueberries, and then when you come to vegetables, you have sweet potatoes, you have squash, zucchini, you have, just trying to think of other vegetables, leafy greens, broccoli, the cruciferous group, cabbage, etc. So these are going to be more so the complex carbohydrates. So today we're going to dive a little bit deeper to understand, is do I really need sugar in my diet and what type of sugar? So from the first session, I explained that when it comes to the term sugar, it is typically a general term because it can refer to simple sugar or it can refer to complex sugar. But in this case, when we're referring to sugar, we're referring to, again, just the general types of sugar. But we're going to break it down in terms of, do you really need more of the simple sugar? Do you need more of the complex sugar? How does that also affect the human diet? Okay. So, one thing that I do want to pull up, because I think that this is important, and while I am pulling this up, I want you to think about a food product that you have in your house or in your pantry. And if you have something near you, then it likely may have a nutrition facts label on it. And what I want you to do, if you do have a food product near you, or even at some point, you can do it now, you can do it later. But what you want to do is you want to investigate that nutrition facts label. Ideally, you're looking for added sugar. So something that contains added sugar, like a beverage that may be sweetened, or it could be a snack. Typically, I know a lot of granola snacks usually have added sugar, so that could also be another example. But what you want to do is you want to look at the nutrition facts label and you want to see the area that shows total carbohydrates. Some may say carbohydrates, but other times it may show total carbohydrates. Underneath that, it may show subsections such as fiber, net carbs, and then added sugars or included added sugars with the percentage sign. It could be different from different products. But again, what you're looking at is that added sugars portion. So it may have a value that may say 2 grams, 6 grams, and then beside that weight percentage or that weight, it may show a percentage sign. So if it shows 6%, that could equate to about 11% of the total of the, excuse me, the total daily value intake for added sugar. Okay. So when you look at that, I want you to think about what that number is because for many people, it's easy to overlook that. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we go through some of these guidelines because it's going to come back up. And so I just want you to have that information accessible once we do refer back to that. Let's see. So this is going to be, and I'm gonna pull it up briefly, but this is going to be the dietary guidelines for Americans 2020 through 2025. And I was actually looking at the 2025 through 2030 version to see if that is actually available. But this version for the 2025 should suffice. So let's see if we can share this briefly. And one thing I will say about this guide as I am pulling it up is that it is meant to be a guideline. So there are some things that you can modify, which I would recommend you modify, but also with, again, good understanding. So let's see. We'll do, let's see. Okay, we'll do it that way. Let's do it. Oof. Okay, so low. Anyway, okay. Apologies. I have two screens, one for the mic and one for my camera. So if this is overlapping, apologies. So anyway, we are looking at the guidelines for dietary guidelines for Americans 2020 through 2025. Again, this is about 164 pages. So it's quite extensive. It covers different topics. And because, okay, got it. So obviously with the table of contents, some of the topics that it goes through will be just covering the key recommendations. Some of the areas that it covers would be just how to follow healthy dietary patterns, being able to personalize and enjoy your food, because that is also a concern, is that some people want to be able to enjoy their food, especially if they have to make changes with their diet. And so some of the topics that you will see if you do get a chance to check it out, and I do encourage you to, is that you will see topics related to children, adolescents, adults, women who are pregnant or lactating or lactating, and then you have older adults. So this covers the different healthy patterns, the intakes, the special considerations. So we think about the topics such as protein, carbohydrates, fats, etc. Even vitamin consumption. How much vitamins are you getting in your diet? The mineral content. Because as we go through different topics, I'm going to cover how important it is to ensure that you're getting enough vitamins and minerals, and why do we need vitamins and minerals? What is the importance of that? So, specifically, if we're going to look at, and I'm just going to base this on adults, okay, for the most part. And because we're talking about sugars, this is on page 116. Well, at least on the Adobe, but on the actual page, I want to say that this is 103, since the previous one is 102. But anyway, we see that the added sugar, and I'm going to zoom in so you can actually, let me do it this way. Bam. There we go. So, as you can see here, the section on added sugars, just scrolling through this first paragraph, or I should say these first two long sentences, but it talks about how adults exceed their recommended sugar or their added sugar limits as it comes from beverages and foods, typically beverages that may be loaded with sugars. And I can tell you that most of the typical drinks, the soft beverages that are on the market, contain an extraordinary, extraordinary amount of sugar. Okay. So some products exceed the percentage of added sugars, at least from what I've seen, which is ridiculous, at least based on some of these recommendations. So, again, when it comes to added sugars, it talks about how many Americans exceed that. And then this section talks about beverage as a source of added sugars. And we'll actually cover some research articles that I have pulled up that are specifically talking about added sugars, and they highlight beverages as a key source that many Americans typically exceed when it comes to added sugar. And so, again, with this dietary guidelines, it's a good source in terms of just getting some information and having a good starting point when it comes to really fine tuning the diet. One thing about added sugars is that you don't need added sugars. And I say that because if you get your sugars from the diet, typically complex carbohydrates, that is what you want to aim for. Again, we talk about the chemical structure. If it takes the body more time to break it down, it's likely going to be good, which means that your body doesn't experience this quick ramp up in terms of your blood sugar spiking instantly. But it's going to take time. It's going to be a wavy pattern where you're going to have a steady flow of energy. Whereas if you are taking in added sugars, you may start to feel energetic, excited at some point, but then you start to feel dreadful. You may not have as much energy as you may had, let's say, 20 minutes ago or 30 minutes ago. And that's also because of how your body is responding to that added sugar. Now, for some people, they're kind of used to it, but it also doesn't negate the fact that your body is still experiencing a lot of discomfort. And for many people, the more you continue with that pattern, it could take a toll on your body, as we'll see from some of these articles. But here, again, we see that this is pretty extensive. And because I want to cover some other ground, I will let you know that this is available on the dietaryguidelines.gov, the dietaryguidelines.gov. You can easily search this 2020 through 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans. And this information, again, is available to the public, as well as with some other resources such as infographics about health at different stages in different topics. So, I encourage you to check out this website, especially if you are foreign to this information. Be sure to check that out. So let's dive into some quick research articles because I said that we would do that. And I want you to also at least see some of the research that has been done related to sugar and again how it can affect the body. Okay, if you ever thought about sugar consumption, is it necessarily bad? Then I think that this is going to at least be good awareness for you. So so this is one of four articles that I have. May not go through the other ones just because of time, but at least this one gives us some idea about added sugar and its association as relates to obesity and weight gain. So, one thing about a lot of the research is that it kind of gives you summary points before you really get into the fiber or meat and potatoes, what other people may call it. But a lot of this information can be hefty. I want to say that while this doesn't necessarily have a page number on the page, it can be quite extensive. But one thing I will say is that looking at this abstract, it pretty much gives us a summary paragraph about the entire article. So when we think about it, this tells us that the SBB, which is the sugar sweetened beverages, accounts for 33% of added sugar intake. Okay. Added sugar intake. And it may not have been this one, but there was another one that actually showed that the intake of sugar, and let me switch from this tab because again, because I'm limited on time, I do want you to see this. So this is another article. I'm just switching, and this is essentially similar, but it's referring to the intake of added sugar from different sources as relates to mortality and cardiovascular diseases. One point from this one was that jumping to the conclusions, and obviously you can see the results in the number of individuals that were investigated, the statistics that were that were obtained. But from the conclusion, it talks about how a higher intake of added sugar is associated with a all cause mortality and CVDs, which is cardiovascular disease. The BMI, which is the body mass index mediates a proportion of these associations. So it pretty much talks about how excess sugar consumption is related to and associated with an increase in cardiovascular disease. So you can think about heart disease, lung disease, cancer, even inflammation of the digestive system. So when people start to complaining about bloating and different issues related to digestion, not being able to digest foods properly, or just having severe abdominal issues, especially as it relates to added sugar can be a suspect in the case. And so, looking at this article, and if you go back, you can pause this if you rewatch it. But this is actually open access, which means that you do not need an account to look up this information. A lot of articles are actually available through this way. You want to navigate to the open access of what I call sciencedirect.com, and you can find this information. And like I said, I wanted to show you this information because when it comes to sugar, many people may ask, well, is sugar bad? And I would say that the added sugar can be bad as it relates to the statistics and the continuing number of statistics and the people that suffer because of added sugar. You think about as you get older, with continuation of added sugar consumption, you start to have just more issues such as type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes. You may have, again, obesity. You may start to have heart disease, difficulty breathing, even muscular problems or back problems related to sugar, added sugar at that. Now, again, complex sugars are good. They are preferred because of the chemical structure. And that is one thing that we want to focus on. We want to focus on those foods that have a lower glycemic index or GI, as well as a lower glycemic load GL, because these would tend to cause less of a spike in the blood sugar, also causing there to be less of inflammation in the body, and it will just help the body to respond well, okay, when it comes to sugar intake and how the sugar is broken down. If the sugar is already in its simplest form, then that could be a problem for the body, okay? And so that's what we want to focus on, is increasing our complex carbohydrates, okay? And so again, when we think about it, going back to the example that I shared with you earlier about looking at a product that you have in your pantry or somewhere in your home and looking on the nutrition facts label for the added sugar panel, you want to see how much sugar is present. And typically, based on that percentage, when you're looking at the includes this much added sugar, you want to keep an eye on that percentage. And even if it may say, hey, is 11%, I would recommend, especially if you tend to overconsume, you likely want to give yourself a limit of maybe even 20%. So instead of trying to say, you know what, I'm at 11% or I consume 50%, so I should be good. But not necessarily, because again, do you really need it? What is the benefit, okay, of added sugar itself? And so, because you don't necessarily need it, you likely don't need any of it at all. Again, you can actually get a lot of essentially your sweet tooth fillers from fruits, and a lot of fruits are quite sweet. And I can tell you that from experience, at least to me, when you get fruits. And I would say you don't need to add any sugar. I know for some people, they can tend to add sugar on top of fruits. But if you just consume the fruit as it is, you're actually doing a lot better. Okay. To add sugar to it, wouldn't recommend. But again, with this information, do with it as you see fit, as with your best health in mind. Okay. So again, these are some articles, and I thought I would have more time to navigate through these, but as you can see, we are stumped on time, but at least I went through this with you. And this won't be the end, because we will actually go into some more topics related to sugar. So at least this time you can actually pencil this in terms of just being able to see, yes, sugar does lead to different types of issues with the body, specifically added sugar. Okay. So again, when I say sugar, for this case, I'm referring to added sugar, not complex sugar, but added sugar. Okay. And again, this is going to be sugar that you find in a lot of ultra processed foods. So you think beverages like soft drinks, snacks like granolas, different types of trail mix, or just a variety mix pack will have added sugars. Different other types of foods, even ice creams and other sweets. A lot of desserts, yes, loaded with sugar, as well as a lot of other ingredients that you really don't necessarily need for health, because they're not really supplying you with much, but like a lot of carbs and fat and sodium. But for this case, again, referring to added sugar. Okay. So again, we covered how much sugar that we need. Again, you can refer to the dietary guidelines, just resharing this tab with you, and also showing you this section is about, at least on this page, is showing about 164. It could be a lot more. Scroll down to the bottom, it could be a lot more, but this is actually available to the public. So you can download this as well as some other resources with pictures and infographics at your leisure. Okay. And then some of these articles that I shared with you. Yeah. So some of these articles you can find on Science Direct open access, and you can even pause, copy this title, you can paste it in, and you can have a field day with looking at this. And again, what you want to look for is the open access. And so typically, like I said, when I share articles, I like to share three. For this one, I know I shared two, but usually for most of them, I like to make sure that they complement each other because you have some articles that may be isolated in terms of information. And I want you to get the full truth, okay? So I never want to give you partial information and then you're wondering, well, is this actually true? At least hopefully with this is confirmed based on a large research study. And then the other article that I share with you, which is here, they also indicate that it was a systematic review of about 1.5 million individuals, which is quite large. So a lot of these studies like to share the information with you so that way you can use it for your own basis. Okay. So hopefully at some point I'll also get into the complex carbohydrates and then really exploring some type of foods, better foods that are useful for that. Now, if you want more information related to this, I'm going to give you a great hint, and this is going to be something that you can use, and that is you can sign up for my coaching sessions. Yes. So if you said, "Hey, I would really like to know what do I need," well, that requires coaching session because that way I can really dial in on your specific needs as well as history and some other parameters. So if that is something that you're interested in, you can navigate to our website at robody.org. And what you'll do is you'll click on that button in the center of your screen, and it should be very attractive to you. You click on that button, you set up a consultation with myself, and we will get started working on those questions that you have. And this is going to be strategic, which means that whatever you say your goal is, we are working on that goal. Okay. So if you said, "Hey, I want to know how much sugar I need to consume, how much do I need?" And I will tell you that based on your history and just other things about yourself. But at least that way I can have a better idea of how to help you. So again, if you are looking for a way to better understand how much sugar do I need, as well as am I consuming too much sugar, then I would encourage you to set up that appointment with me, or you can reach out to me directly via social media or email, and I will be happy to help you set that up. And I'm excited again that you have joined us today on our topic related to sugar. Okay. So, again, as I shared earlier, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on your screen. That way you stay up to date on the latest information, okay? As well as if you have an upcoming event or anything of that nature, looking for someone to share some words as it relates to health and wellness, feel free to reach out to me directly, or you can navigate to our website. You can share your contact information and I will be in touch that way. But again, I also do provide information to different audiences on health and wellness with a biblical approach. So that is one thing I do share is that I also share this information. There's a lot of knowledge in different areas, but the biblical approach, understanding the foundation where a lot of this has stemmed from, is so important. So that's also one thing that I do share. So if you've enjoyed this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure you share this. And until next time, I will talk with you later. Hope you enjoyed this. Bye.